Everything you've been told about death, it misses something vital. Death isn't a brick wall, a void, or a blindfolded jump into mystery. For over 1,000 years, there's been a sacred text kept tucked away from public view that offers a precise account, not vague symbols or riddles, but a step-by-step description of what unfolds during the 49 days after we take our last breath. This revered work, called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, wasn't meant for just anyone. It was shared only with those believed to be spiritually mature, with hearts strong enough to look truth in the eye. In its pages, death is no ending. It's more like a test, a spiritual corridor that decides whether a soul escapes the endless pain of rebirth or slips quietly back into it, none the wiser. The reason most souls stumble here isn't weakness. It's not knowing what to look for. They miss the cues. They don't see that the visions, the sounds, the rush of feelings that come after death aren't coming from somewhere else. They are all crafted by the mind itself. By the time that truth clicks, it's often too late. If what this ancient book says holds water, then the very first moments after death might outweigh a lifetime of choices. Because everything pivots on one pivotal moment, when you step out of your own body. When your breathing stops and your chest falls still, the world doesn't disappear. It changes. You don't dissolve into nothing. Something new rises. For centuries, sacred texts have tried to capture this moment. You may feel like something heavy just lifted, like waking from a deep dream-heavy sleep. Your heart no longer beats. Your lungs no longer draw breath. But you'll still be conscious. Deep down, you'll sense something is different, and your mind will struggle to grasp it. For anyone who's experienced an out-of-body sensation, this will feel hauntingly familiar, except this time, there's no return ticket. Then it strikes a brilliant, radiant light, so intense, so engulfing, it feels like your very being is melting into it. This is what the Tibetan text calls the clear light of reality. If you recognize it, if you let go completely and surrender to it, you'll merge with it. You'll rise beyond the endless cycle of birth and death. Enlightenment will happen in that instant. No more reincarnation. No more return. That's the great moment of freedom. And it arrives the instant you pass. But almost no one sees it for what it is. Why? Because we've been trained our whole lives to fear the unknown. The soul panics. It clutches old memories, old identities, dreams left unfinished. Instead of embracing the light, it retreats. And that's when the illusions take hold. You'll begin to hear sounds, whispers, soft voices, like echoes drifting through fog. The world around you starts to shift. Forms appear, shapes, shadows. Familiar places and faces flicker into view. But they aren't real, not yet. These are projections. The mind, desperate for meaning, starts piecing together a reality that matches what it once knew. And this is where many souls begin to wander. Instead of recognizing this as a sacred crossroads, they fall into confusion. They reach for what's familiar. And the mind obliging creates. It places they loved voices they trusted, even figures of faith they once prayed to. But all of it is coming from within. They don't realize it's not the world they are seeing. It's their own beliefs taking form. If only they knew the truth, that these visions are tests, that none of this is solid. If they could understand, they might let go. But most don't. Instead, they follow these images deeper into what the Tibetan tradition calls the bardo, the space between death and rebirth. And so it begins again. The soul, still clinging to who it was, steps back into the cycle. That's why the first few moments after death are the most critical. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that awareness is everything. Those who've prepared, who've trained their minds to recognize the signs can see through the illusions. They can break free. But for those who die still wrapped in the identity of their past life, still clinging to what they were, the path forward is already set. They embark on a 49-day odyssey, stepping into visions that might lift them into awakening or pull them back into yet another lifetime on earth. What comes next in this journey is not for the faint of heart. Before we enter the deeper mysteries of the Bardo, there's something you ought to understand. You're no longer in the life you once knew. You've entered the Bardo, that strange in-between realm that comes after your final breath, but before what's next. Here time doesn't behave the way it used to. Moments stretch endlessly, and whole days might vanish like mist. You don't have a body anymore. No voice, no touch, only awareness. And here lies the first challenge. Most souls don't even know they've died. They wander in a haze, trapped inside the memory of who they were, clinging to the echoes of a world that has already slipped away. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo is not a fixed place. It shifts like a dream where the boundaries of reality melt and dissolve. In this state, your mind becomes the architect. Whatever was buried deep inside your fears, your longings, your forgotten sorrow takes on shape and color. Every thought becomes a scene, every emotion a presence, and the entire experience plays out over exactly 49 days, moving through a series of unfolding phases. For many, it begins in confusion. The soul drifts back toward what's familiar: home, family, loved ones. It lingers near the places it once lived, whispering, reaching desperate to be heard. But no one responds. No one sees. Slowly it begins to dawn. This isn't a dream. This is death. Yet even in that moment, the mind resists. It clings to the old self, searching for comfort, for logic, for something to explain it all away. But the Bardo offers no such relief. It is not a resting place. It is a mirror, a passage, and the soul must now face itself in its rawest form. At first, this realm feels calm, even serene. There's no physical pain, no suffering, just awareness. Many describe it as drifting through an endless expanse, a quiet ocean of light, where each thought sends ripples into eternity. Then, without warning, the visions begin. They start gently. You might see luminous beings glowing with warmth and grace, what some might call angels, sages, or celestial guides. They radiate peace, compassion, and wisdom. These are not strangers. They are the soul's own higher truths, made visible. And if the soul can recognize them for what they are, reflections of its highest self, it can join them, dissolve into pure awareness, and break free from the wheel of rebirth. But that moment requires clarity. And most souls falter. They question. They hesitate. And in this limbo, doubt is enough to change everything. The light beings begin to fade. In their place, shadows creep in. The peaceful faces shift into masks of unease. Their voices, once soothing, now whisper fear and confusion. The landscape darkens. What once felt like heaven slowly becomes a trial. This is the test of illusions, the next passage through the Bardo. But these frightening figures aren't devils. They aren't punishment. They are born from within. They are made of your guilt, your shame, the sorrow you never faced. They are the cast-off pieces of the mind now returning in form. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is clear: what you meet in the Bardo is not some external judgment, but a reflection of your own soul. This isn't some divine punishment or outside judgment. What's happening here is something far more intimate, a reckoning within. And that's what makes this passage so perilous. Fear doesn't just rise, it tightens its grip. And as it does, the illusions grow stronger. The bardo isn't merely a holding place between lives. It's a mirror, one that reflects everything the soul has tried to bury. And for many, that reflection is too much to bear. This is where the real trial begins, because what the soul sees next will shape everything that follows. In the beginning, the visions seem almost heavenly. The soul beholds radiant realms suffused with shimmering light and figures that radiate pure unconditional compassion. These beings don't speak yet. Their presence washes over like a warm tide of peace. People who have had near-death experiences often describe them as angels, holy teachers, or divine beings. But they're not here to judge or rescue. They are the soul's own higher self made visible. They're reflections of the purest light within. If the soul can see that it can rise beyond the cycle. But recognizing that truth demands clarity, and clarity is hard to come by when fear clouds the mind. For those who spent their lives chasing after desires, afraid of death, or clinging to the image they built of themselves, the peaceful vision begins to waver. The radiant figures are still there, but something about them starts to shift. Their forms flicker, grow unstable, as if reality itself is coming apart at the seams. And then just like that, they vanish. In their place, darker visions take hold. The Tibetan Book of the Dead doesn't soften this part. As time passes, in the bardo those comforting presences are replaced by something far more terrifying, monstrous, beings of unspeakable form. Their screams don't sound human. Their faces twist in rage and chaos. Some bear multiple heads, others wield countless arms, and many have eyes that blaze like fire. They come like demons, executioners, hunters, and they ignite panic in any soul not ready for what's unfolding. This is the moment most souls break. They try to flee. They cry out. They beg for help. But there's nowhere to go, because none of it is coming from outside. These terrifying apparitions aren't enemies in the true sense. They're not real in the way we think of reality. They're born from within the soul's own fears, given form, its unspoken guilt, its old regrets, wearing a mask. Every selfish deed, every lie, every hidden shame now takes shape and lunges forward. But the threat isn't external. It's self-made. Here's the cruel twist. The more the soul tries to fight back, the stronger these nightmares become. Fear feeds the vision. Terror makes it grow. And the only path to freedom isn't through resistance, but through recognition. The souls that see the truth, that these horrors are only projections of their own mind, watch as they vanish instantly, like fog melting in morning sunlight. The illusion dies the moment it's no longer believed. But few ever make it to that point. Most remain trapped in the fear, never seeing through to the deeper lesson. This is the second major threshold of the afterlife. The first was the clear light, a test of awareness. The second is this trial of illusions where mastery over the self is what counts. Those who fail are pulled deeper, lost further in the spinning wheel of karma. The grip of fear won't release them. For many, this torment stretches across weeks. And then, somewhere around the third or fourth week, the soul is brought face to face with the next challenge. This one offers no place to hide. There's no celestial courtroom, no godlike figure holding a gavel. What follows is something far more personal and far more profound. The Tibetan teachings call it the Great Mirror, the moment when the soul stands before the full truth of its earthly life. At first, it seems calm. The nightmarish beings fade. There's even a sense of release, relief, as though it might all be over. But then something more powerful takes hold, and it's not a vision. Not a dream, not even a memory. It is reliving. Time folds back on itself. The soul is swept through every choice, every word, every intention it ever had. But this isn't recollection, it's total immersion. The soul doesn't just remember its life, it feels it again. All of it. The kindness it gave, the pain it caused, the moments it believed were secret. And it doesn't just feel these moments through its own eyes, but through the hearts of everyone it touched. When you cause pain, you will feel that pain. And when you bring joy, that joy will flow right back to you. But there's no filter in between, no cushion of excuses, no place to hide behind reasons. Everything hits you, straight on, raw, undeniable, and immediate. It's not punishment, it's simply the truth. And it doesn't come from an outside force judging you. It's your own soul that takes the measure. Tibetan wisdom tells us this moment is deeply painful for most people. We spend our lives dodging blame, explaining our behavior, covering up our guilt. But when death comes, there's no more hiding. You can't defend your choices. You can't bargain or talk your way out. You only feel. And for some, that's where the agony begins. But not for everyone. For those who have lived with kindness, with honesty, with depth of heart, it's something else entirely. They're washed over with peace. Every good deed, every generous word returns to them, like waves of soft light. But others are overwhelmed not by punishment, but by the unbearable truth of their own actions. It's a reckoning, one no soul can escape. What's even more startling is what happens next. Tibetan teachings say this life review doesn't just reflect the past, it shapes what comes next. By the time the soul has relived every moment of its life, it's not the same anymore. It's been changed deeply by everything it just re-experienced. If the soul finishes this journey filled with guilt, sorrow, or clinging, it's pulled back into the cycle of rebirth. The heavier the burden, the lower the realm to which it returns. Some souls find themselves born into hardship, into pain, into scarcity, not because of any judgment passed from above, but because of the weight of their own inner state. They don't even realize they're choosing it, but they are. That's why the life review isn't just a recap, it's a test of whether the soul can release what it clings to, whether it can face the past without chains, whether it can walk away from regret and fear and longing. Those who manage that move closer to freedom. Those who don't are drawn into another round, another life, another body, another struggle. That's why spiritual teachings often stress the need to prepare for death long before it comes. Because when that moment arrives, when the great mirror is held up, you don't get to change what you see. What's reflected has already been written by the life you lived. And by the 4th or 5th week in the Bardo, the final moment begins. The soul now faces its greatest turning point. Will it break free? Or will it be pulled back in the Bardo? The space between death and rebirth is almost at its end. The illusions have all played their part. The soul has been through its memories, relived its joys and sorrows, uncovered every secret that shaped its journey. And now, after weeks of drifting through this mysterious in-between, the most critical choice must be made. This is the final test, and everything hangs on it. The soul stands at a fork in the road. It can either see through the illusions and be released forever, or give in to the pull of desire and fall back into the wheel of life. But here's the catch: most souls don't realize they're choosing. By this point, the illusions are so powerful, so convincing, that the soul barely remembers it's in the Bardo at all. And now the visions take on a new shape. They're no longer frightening or strange. They become gentle, familiar, almost welcoming. According to the Book of the Dead, in these last days, the soul will be offered a way out, But it's not what it seems. It's a trap. It sees the faces of loved ones, hears voices calling it home. Places from long ago appear warm and inviting. There's a deep yearning, a pull toward the known. But these aren't just memories or dreams. They are windows into the next life waiting just ahead. The karmic forces have already begun stitching the next incarnation together. The moment the soul reaches for one of these visions, if it clings or follows, it's swept away, drawn instantly into a new body, a new beginning, and another long forgetting. Rebirth happens in an instant. There's no pause, no second thought. The moment the soul locks onto a craving, a fear, or something it can't let go of, it's instantly drawn into another womb, another reality without the faintest memory of the decision it just made. Ancient texts, like the Book of the Dead, speak of this as slipping into a deep sleep, a kind of a spiritual blackout, where everything from the previous life vanishes. It's like waking up from a dream you can't quite grasp, no trace of what came before. And so the wheel turns once more, birth, pain, death, then back into the in-between. But for the rare few who are ready, this moment takes a different shape. These souls, having prepared for what's to come, begin to see through the show. They spot the illusions for what they really are, just flickering images spun by the mind to keep them anchored. They don't cling to familiar comforts. They don't flinch from fear. Instead, they stay still, awake, unmoved. And in that stillness, something astonishing unfolds. The veil lifts, karma's pull loosens. The urge to return fades into silence. The soul, untethered by longing or dread, breaks free. It escapes the loop entirely. Tibetan teachers call this liberation. Not a place, not a paradise, not some distant afterlife, as many imagine. It's an awakening, a return to what's always been there, a reality untouched by illusion, untouched by suffering, untouched by the back and forth of this world. Yet almost no one makes it to that place, because reaching it demands a kind of awareness most never even think to develop, the awareness to see clearly in the instant of death, the clarity to spot the trap just before it snaps shut. And that's why, for more than 1,000 years, this wisdom stayed hidden. Because if people really grasped what death is and what it isn't, it would upend everything. The next part of the journey isn't just about where we go when we die. It's about why this knowledge was buried for so long. For over a millennium, these teachings were locked away, shared only among the most advanced, seekers kept from the public, silenced by powerful institutions. Even now, few have ever heard of them, and that's not by accident. The Tibetan Book of the Dead was never written for casual readers. It was seen as too potent, too risky for those not spiritually prepared. Because if people fully understood what happens after death, their entire worldview would be shaken to its core. Their beliefs, their fears, their sense of what's real and what isn't. Just imagine it. If death isn't the end, if it's not punishment, if no divine judge is waiting at the gates, then what becomes of the systems built around those beliefs? Religion as we know it, the power of governments, the rules we live by, they would all start to unravel. For ages, religious leaders have spoken of heaven and hell, of punishment from above, of obedience to sacred laws, to earn a place beyond. But these stories have served more than just spiritual comfort. They've been tools of control. When people are convinced that their eternal fate lies in someone else's hands, they obey. They fall in line. They live in fear. But what if the truth is far simpler and more unsettling? What if no one is judging you but you? What if the afterlife isn't about reward or damnation at all, but simply your own mind, your own conscience reflected back at you. That's the kind of truth these teachings reveal. And that's exactly why they were kept from public view. Because once people understand that their fate isn't in someone else's hands, but their own, everything changes. That kind of responsibility is terrifying. And for many, it's too much to bear. And yet the story doesn't stop there. Because now, modern science is beginning to echo what these ancient voices have been saying all along. Accounts of near-death experiences, NDEs, are filled with details that match these old teachings. People talk about entering a realm of pure light, about reliving every choice they ever made, about feeling peace or fear based on how they lived. Even groundbreaking research in quantum physics hints that consciousness might not be locked inside the brain, that it could stretch beyond death, that it might exist outside time, outside space. For so long, this kind of talk was brushed off as myth, as folklore. But now, the boundary between old wisdom and new science is getting harder to see. Still, most people remain in the dark. Why? Because the world is designed to keep us looking away, distracted, consumed by the physical, the temporary, the fleeting. We spend our lives haunted by shadows, fears that were planted in us, not to protect, but to keep us chasing wealth, praise, and the feeling of being enough. So when the final breath comes, most of us are stunned, as if no one ever warned us this moment would arrive. One of the most powerful lies we've been sold is that death is a mystery too deep to understand. But that's not quite true. Long ago, Tibetan sages explored this very terrain and came back with a map. What they found was astonishing. The first 49 days after death unfold like a precise journey. The mind, no longer tethered to a body, becomes the very force that shapes what comes next. And the one thing that makes a difference, staying aware. But here's the hard part. Most of us aren't even practicing. Because here's what no one tells you. If you drift through your days asleep, unaware of who you are or what truly matters, you will be just as lost when death knocks on your door. And so, the wheel turns again, over and over. Unless you choose something different, unless you open your eyes now while you still can, what comes next may be more crucial than anything we've learned so far. Because if the wisdom of these ancient texts holds any truth, the real question isn't just what happens when we die, but rather, are we missing the whole point of being alive? According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, many of us are already on track to repeat this life. Not because we're bad people, not because we lack strength, but because we're unprepared in every way that matters. Look around. How many folks do you see taking time to think about death, to train for it? Not many. Society teaches us to look away to avoid the subject, cover it up, drown it out with noise and comfort. We pour ourselves into our routines, our devices, our everyday luxuries, all while quietly knowing that day is coming. And when it does, we'll be just as shocked, just as frightened as those who came before us, lost in a fog, caught in the same old traps. Because the great test isn't waiting out there in some far-off dimension. It's happening right now. The bardo, the space between life and death, isn't some mythical place. It's a mirror of our own mind. The visions that terrify wandering souls after death. They're rooted in the same fears that hold people back here and now. The hunger that pulls spirits into a new life. It's the same hunger that drives us to chase more money, more attention, more fleeting highs. The confusion that blinds souls in the afterlife. It's born from the same blindness that keeps us following the crowd, never stopping to question the stories we're told. If you're not fully present now, you won't be any more aware when death comes. And that's why so many never break free. The Book of the Dead lays it bare. The patterns we cling to, our fears, our desires, our habits, they don't disappear when we die. They follow us. If you lived unaware, you will die unaware. If fear ran your life, it'll greet you again. If your days were spent chasing illusions, that pursuit will carry on, even after your body is gone. It's a cycle that grips us tightly. And the cruelest part, we're the ones who built the cage. But there's a truth hidden in all this that only a few will ever grasp. The cycle isn't unbreakable. Those Tibetan masters didn't share their teachings to impress. They left them behind as lifelines for anyone willing to truly awaken, to find a way out. And the first step is learning to see clearly, to face the reality head on. Most won't take that step. They'll keep putting it off, convinced there's more time that they can deal with death after the bills are paid and the errands are run. And then, in a flash, it's too late. They enter the bardo just as unprepared, just as shaken as everyone else, who never saw it coming. But there are a few, those who begin to unbind themselves while there's still breath in their lungs, who shift the entire course of what follows. Because the time to get ready isn't after life ends. It's now while the heart still beats. And it's not about joining a religion or adopting certain rites. It's about waking up, cultivating the kind of awareness that sees through illusions, that loosens fear's grip, that lets go of the endless wanting, and steps outside the roles that have kept us small. Not just in this world, but in the one that may follow. So here's the real question. Could it be that we're already dead in some way? Most folks will hear that and shrug it off. They'll slide right back into the noise of daily life, the errands, the scrolling, the routines that numb the edges of thought. But for a few, this moment might strike a deeper chord. For them, something shifts. They recognize a line has been crossed. And suddenly, another question rises, more pressing, more personal. If the way we live shapes what happens after we die, then how do we get ready? How do we slip out of the loop before it closes in again? The answer, surprisingly, isn't complicated. If death is the exam, then life is the study guide. But the catch is, most people don't even realize there's a test. They live like there's always more time, as if death is some far-off storm that'll never quite reach their door. Until one day, it does. The Tibetan sages had a powerful insight: to meet death with open eyes, you must live the same way. If you spend your years running from truth, chasing comfort, avoiding the mirror, then when your final moment arrives, you'll be caught off guard. You'll grab for the familiar, your name, your fears, the moments you never made peace with. And that grasping will drag you right back into the wheel of forgetting, right back into the illusion. But there is another road. The first step, letting go. Not walking away from life, but loosening its grip on your heart. Most people are wrapped in chains of craving for money, for approval, for love, for some shiny label to say they matter. They chase these things, hoping they'll finally feel full. But when the veil lifts in the bardo, that in-between place the mystics speak of, none of it comes with you. The only thing that weighs in the balance is the state of your awareness. The more you are tangled in the world's offerings, the harder it is to release. And the harder it is to release, the more likely you are to circle back into another life of struggle, another round of forgetting who you really are. But letting go doesn't mean abandoning your family or living in a cave. It means mastering the terrain of your own mind, becoming the one who drives the car, not the one thrown around in the backseat of emotion. It means realizing that nothing here, not your body, your bank account, your reflection in the mirror, is here to stay. Once that sinks in deep, death loses its sting. The second step is awareness. The Bardo is said to be a land of illusion. But so is this life right here, right now. Everything you think is real. Every opinion, every fear, every belief has been colored by past wounds, outside noise, and hidden programming. If you don't start seeing through the mirage now, you won't see through it then. That's why meditation, self-reflection, asking hard questions, they're not just spiritual hobbies. They are a training ground. Just like an athlete wouldn't wait until game day to get in shape, the mind must be prepared long before the final breath. Because in that moment, your inner world becomes your outer one. If fear and confusion have ruled your life, they'll flood your death. But if you've spent your time here planting seeds of stillness, honesty, and surrender, then in the Bardo, you'll see the smoke and mirrors for what they are. You won't panic. You won't cling. You'll stand quietly, see clearly, and stay free. That's the fork in the road between those who break through and those who remain bound. And finally, the third step, acceptance. Death isn't the enemy. It's not something to be shoved into the shadows or wrapped in silence. It's the most sacred crossing you will ever face, the moment the curtain is drawn and the truth walks in. If you spend your life fearing it, then fear will be your companion even after you die. But if you come to see it as a natural passage, just another step in a long journey, you'll meet it with calm rather than chaos. The ancient sages didn't obsess over death. They prepared for it not out of dread, but because they understood something deeper, that to truly grasp life, you must also come to terms with its end. They knew the two were one and the same, each reflecting the other. And this is exactly why today's world constantly floods us with noise and distraction, because a society made up of people who aren't afraid to die is a society filled with people who cannot be controlled. If something in you recognizes this, if you've begun to question the fear most carry without knowing why, then you are already walking a different path. You're beginning to wake up, but there is still one more truth waiting for you, something that brings all these pieces together. Because all the talk of Bardo, states illusions, and spiritual freedom means nothing without understanding this final piece. The sad truth is that most people will never get ready for death. They'll drift through life half asleep, chasing whatever glitters, running from what hurts, afraid of the unknown. And when that final moment arrives, they'll enter the in-between, confused, frightened, and unready, just as they were in life. But here's the truth at the heart of it all. Death doesn't transform you. It simply reveals who you've always been. The Tibetan Book of the Dead doesn't describe heaven or hell the way most religions do. It doesn't split people into the righteous and the wicked. There is no divine punishment, because the Bardo isn't a place outside of you. It's the reflection of your own mind. What you meet after death, the radiant light, the gentle beings, the frightening visions, the moments from your life playing back, and the urge to be reborn are all shaped by your own consciousness. If fear ruled you in life, fear will greet you in death. If you clung tightly to things, you'll still be clinging to shadows. If you lived unaware, death won't suddenly make you awake. You'll wander through that next space, reacting, reaching, slipping back into the same old cycle. But if you lived with eyes open, if you trained your mind to see through illusion, if you took time to prepare while still breathing, then death becomes something else entirely. Not an end, but a test, a doorway, a rare moment of choice. This is the wisdom that has been hidden for centuries. This is why such teachings were banned or buried, because once people understand death, they stop living in fear. And people who aren't afraid are no longer easy to manipulate. They don't buy into empty promises. They stop worshipping fear, whether it comes in the form of dogma authority or false security. A person who sees clearly what death really is becomes free in life. Their choices change. Their thinking sharpens. They stop running after fleeting highs or losing sleep over things that don't last. They stop holding on to people, possessions, or roles, knowing none of it was ever truly theirs. They see that the self they worked so hard to build was only ever a mask. And when their time comes, when that last breath leaves the body and the great crossing begins, they don't panic. They don't grab for something to hold. They don't fall back into the haze of forgetting. Instead, they remain awake. And in that clarity, they face the one true decision to let go completely and be free or return. Thank you, truly. Thank you for walking this far with me. If something stirred within you today, if a door opened in your heart or a quiet voice whispered, "There's more to this life than what I've been told," then don't ignore that. It's not just a passing thought. It's a calling, a remembering, a sacred invitation to see beyond the veil and live with your eyes and soul wide open. This channel isn't just about information. It's about transformation. And if you've felt that shift tonight, even just a little, I hope you'll stay. Because we are building something here, a space for truth seekers, deep thinkers, and old souls who know in their bones that life is more than paychecks and routines, who sense that something eternal is whispering beneath the noise. So if that's you, if your spirit is awake or awakening, then you belong here. Click subscribe. Tap that little bell so you never miss a moment that just might change everything. And if this message found you at the right time, let me know in the comments. Just say, "I understood it." That's all. No explanations needed. Just a signal, a heartbeat from one soul to another. Until next time, take care of your mind. Tend to your spirit. And remember, the journey doesn't end here. It never has. I'll see you in the next one.